Let's talk about in-house marketing versus outsourcing your marketing for roofers. And let's just run through it. Pros and cons, T-tables. But first, hey, I'm Carl Stoy, the founder of Stoy Media. And long story short, we provide leads to home service businesses on a pay-per-lead basis. And so let's talk about in-house versus outsourcing it to an agency who you're going to pay a monthly fee to, and maybe performance fees and rev share, depending on what your deal is with the agency. Normally, it's just a retainer, but let's talk about it. And first, let's create our diagram here. So we have pros and cons. Over here, we're going to do outsourcing, and here we're going to do in-house. Now, pros and cons. Pros and cons. Let's talk about the pros of in-house marketing, because truthfully, this may be the better option for you if you are large enough to be able to afford people like this and have the ability to actually find good media buyers. Which, if you have in-house employees, you're going to get way clearer communication. So that's going to be a pro. Don't worry about my writing, but you're going to get way clearer and way better communication, because instead of having to get on the phone or text an agency, they're down the hall. You can walk over to them. And not only that, if they're only working for you, you can make this branded, which, yes, this is a pro to also outsourcing. If you outsource it to an agency, it's going to be branded. But here in-house, you can have that person also post your social media stuff. You can have that person also put out yard signs. You can have this person do more stuff than just running everything branded, which, yes, you can have branded, but depending on who you're outsourcing it to, it may also not be branded your company. Now the last one, it's going to cost less per lead. So cost less per lead. And that's just objectively thinking off of the platform, because truthfully, you have to account for the person you are hiring to get these leads. That costs in your cost per lead, because without that person, you wouldn't have leads. So therefore, that person is added into your cost per lead. If you're paying your in-house guy $3, $5, $7, $10,000 a month because you have a very good media buyer, which, just to be clear, that's also a con to in-house media buying, but we'll talk about that in a moment. If you're paying your guy that much, you have to add that into your cost per lead because you are paying this person. You see, the pro of outsourcing it to an agency is the fact that you have cheaper cost. So cheaper cost. Now, unless you make it very clear to an agency, actually, we're going to talk about the cons later. I'm jumping the boat here. You have a cheaper cost because you're not paying one person's full-time salary. Matter of fact, you don't need a media buyer to be in your account for 40 hours a week. You just don't need it. So if you even hire someone in person, they're most likely not going to be sitting in your ad account making ads all day, or making ads or sitting in your ad account all day, because you just don't need that. Maybe that person would go post social media or whatever. So the true benefit to an agency is the fact that you are simply going to pay for a part-time media buyer. If you think about it like that, maybe an agency looks a little bit different. Now, yes, there's some issues with expectations and certain things like that, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Not only that, you do also get branded leads. So, I mean, depending on your deal, you may have branded leads. You may not have branded leads, depending on if you're buying leads from somebody, which we're going to talk about later. But it's going to be branded, so that's another pro, because you're growing your brand, you're spending your money, you're growing your brand and getting leads. Because if you keep posting, well, people in your area are going to keep seeing your logo, and that's going to make it more likely that they go on your website, give you a call, etc. So branded, which is a pro. But not only that, a good amount of agencies that are not one-person teams means you are going to get an entire media buying team, an entire team of creative strategists, media buyers, maybe even analysts, whatever, for $1,000 to $3,000 to $5,000 to $7,000 a month. Which in reality, if you hire an in-person team and have 5 people on the team, that's going to be minimum $30,000 to $50,000 a month in overhead, because you're hiring people in-house 40 hours a week. If you're simply going to hire them part-time, you might as well just hire an agency. So it might be $1,000 to, let's say $5,000 a month. Obviously, if these numbers seem too obscure for you, $5,000 a month, no way. Okay, you're probably small enough to where $1,000 a month is where most people would charge. But you have to be clear. If you don't pay people very well, you're probably not going to get the best. So same thing here. A con of running an in-house team is the fact you need to pay full-time salaries. So full-time salaries, not 1099. You have W-2s with insurance, 401ks, et cetera, et cetera. Unless you hire them W-2, you're basically hiring an agency. So there's no point in doing this in-house when you're just hiring a part-time person who's going to work 3 other part-time jobs and is not going to be fully focused on your stuff. So you have full-time salaries. You got real bills to pay here. Not only that, it's not going to be very easy to get a good media buyer to work in person with you. Let's just be clear. So talent is going to be hard to find. Talent is hard to find because most of these people who have been killer media buyers are either going to go off and maybe do affiliate marketing, or they're just going to work remote for an agency because they don't want to move to your area in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, to simply work in person and be a media buyer. They don't want to do that because they're also not going to be paid whatever you're probably thinking you can pay a media buyer. If you're expecting to find the best of the best media buyer, he's not going to take $1, $2, $3, $5,000 a month. They're going to take significantly more because they know their worth. Without them, you basically have no marketing. You have wasted ad spend. And so, truthfully, the talent is going to be kind of hard because agencies like Story Media are going to hire them and pay them way more than you probably expect to pay them. So be sure, if you're going to find a good media buyer, you're going to look where they are and you're going to be willing to pay them as much as they are. And the last one is that it's all reliant. So that's another con of running an in-house team because it's all reliant on this one person. If you have a team of 8, that's different because 8 people could all switch around. But if you're sole person buying media within Facebook or you're sole person making the ads, running the ads, everything, if that person gets sick, leaves, starts working for an agency, goes behind your back, is having a bad week, if something bad happens with this one person, your entire company is going to feel it because if you don't have leads, then your salesmen have nothing to run. And if your salesmen have nothing to run, then they're going to leave. And if you don't have sales coming in, then your installers need to go get work. So truthfully, it all sits on this one person. And I'm going to talk about this later and how you can actually diversify your marketing. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to have all your eggs in one media buyer's basket. Because like I said, if he gets sick, goes on vacation, has a bad week, something happens. Because this guy basically runs your entire company. If he says, I want to go this way and it doesn't work, everybody feels it. Now let's talk about the cons of outsourcing your marketing. Because truthfully, the horror stories don't end. Especially in the home service space, the horror stories do not end. Everybody has a story to say about somebody who scammed them, who ran away with their money, who got them leads, but they never turned into appointments. But oftentimes you have to be very clear on the expectations, which can sometimes be very skewed. So I think the first con to put would just be it's a hit or a miss if you don't know what you're doing on results. Because if you are just jumping on calls with agencies, trying to pick the cheapest one that's in your budget, and you're kind of going in blind, you're just going to pick whoever says they have the cheapest price or whoever has the smoothest sales pitch, which, yeah, then it's going to be a hit or miss. Or if you don't have any processes, if you don't have any setting processes, no sales processes, you've never bought leads before, you just like blaming other people for your problems, everybody's going to be a miss. So that's a con, but not really, because if you don't have the humility to say, when is it my fault? Then every single agency you work with is just going to be a mess. And if beforehand you don't ask them questions about certain things, you don't ask them about KPIs, you don't ask them about expected results from other people, you don't ask the right questions, every single agency you decide to work with is just going to be a complete mess. And like I said, if you're not humble about it, also a complete mess. So yes, hit or miss on the results. But number 2, you're going to have to pay regardless. So regardless if they bring in leads or if they bring in sales or whatever you want to have their KPI be, regardless if it works or not, you have to pay them still every single month. And that's the same thing with having an in-house team. Whether they work or not, you have to pay them. You can't just get to the end of the month and say, you know what, you guys didn't work, so therefore I'm now going to not pay you and fire you. That doesn't work. You're just going to get sued. And same thing here. You work with the wrong agency, or I guess the right agency, you don't pay them, they're going to sue you. So you have to pay regardless, whether it works or whether it doesn't. And the commission-only agencies are usually a little iffy to get into, especially since sometimes those people who offer just pay per close are going to ask for $15,000 up front, because it's going to be quite an investment into you to make sure that you actually succeed. But the last one, which is actually the first one over here in the pros, the con for an agency is you have slower communication. The person, truthfully, doesn't know everything about your business. The person running your company's ads doesn't know everything about your business the way an in-house person would, because that person is there in the office, they live nearby, they know the area, and there's nothing wrong. An agency can totally run your ads from wherever they are in the world and do just fine. But the person in person knows your company way better than the agency who has 10 clients, which, like I said, nothing wrong with it. Even if they have 100 clients, they can still do a good job, and I'm sure of it. But they don't know your company the way an in-house media buyer would. And you have to be okay with that they're just not going to know every single detail. But that's your job now, to tell them everything that you need for them to know, the way you would an in-house media buyer. Hey, this is all the stuff I need you to know about us, about our area, about our competition, our offer, whatever. Let them know all that information. And the same thing, earlier you could walk down the hall. Now you have to call them, you have to text them, you have to jump on a Google Meet. You have to, there's a little bit more barrier to communication, but like I said earlier, if you have an in-house marketing team and you're paying them part-time, or they're not even nearby, same thing. You're gonna have to get on the phone with them, you're gonna have to call them, you're gonna have to text them. But there's this third way to get leads, which I wanna talk about on the reliance part. Because as I mentioned earlier, having one in-house media buyer essentially means you are all reliant on this one person. Like I said, if this person goes on vacation, gets sick, something happens to them, the entire company crumbles because this one person who is buying all of your media is getting you leads. If this person goes away, well then you're going to have a really hard time making sure sales is excited to keep coming to work, because they don't have leads to run. They don't have things to do. Your installers don't have anything to install. So there's a third way, which this third way is called affiliates. So affiliates. Now, I'm sure you have heard about pay-per-lead before. Everybody has a horror story with Angie, Thumbtack, Yelp. This isn't that. This is where you buy leads, but they're exclusive, that they're not generated from these shady methods, which this is where you need to do your due diligence. Same thing with an agency. You can't just run into an agency relationship blind. You have to ask questions. You have to, research them. You have to look into the affiliate that is sending you leads on a pay-per-lead basis, which there's some pros and cons to this, which I want to be clear on. Now, Story Media does this. We do affiliates, and I can tell you, every single big company in your home service, I'm telling you, your home service, fencing, roofing, baths, remodels, pest control, anything. The biggest companies in your industry do this. If you don't believe me, do your research. But all of them do this. Now, it's not going to be public, but they all do this if you know the right marketing manager. And why? What is the pro to this? Number one, it doesn't affect your brand. So here's the thing. You don't need, here, I'm going to just make sure I write it down first. Doesn't affect brand. See, you don't need a huge brand to make a lot of money. If that's your sole goal in terms of running your company, which for most people that is, you don't need a huge brand in order to make $100 million. I can tell you, because I have met with companies with no brand and have made $100 million a year. They have little to no brand and they just buy leads. They have a crazy amount of door knockers. They just do whatever they're doing way larger than you. And in the case of buying leads, they probably buy a bunch of leads. That's the dirty truth. And so it doesn't affect your brand if your media buyer or your agency does something a little bit too shady, because it doesn't matter. It just matters the quality that comes out. Are these people turning into appointments? Is your team going to the right homes? Are they the right home size? Do they actually have credit? Like things like that. So it doesn't affect your brand in the fact that they can do whatever they want and you are still going to be okay. But another pro to this is you have a set cost per lead, so a set CPL. You see, if you say, I am only going to buy a roofing lead from you for $120 a lead, no more, like no less, just $120. Whether that affiliate loses money on those leads or makes money, it doesn't matter. You're still buying them for $120 a lead. Now, of course, you don't want to say, I'm only going to buy leads for 40 bucks. What? Because that affiliate is now going to have to do something a little bit too dirty, or that agency, that pay-per-lead agency is going to have to do something very dirty in order to actually get their cost per lead lower than $40. And so that doesn't mean that $40 is where most people get their leads from or at, but you understand. You can't just be like, give me a lead for 10 bucks. I'm not going to pay more than 10 bucks. Angie does that, but I want it to be exclusive, and I want them to have a huge credit score, and I want them to have a bunch of money, and I want them to be $5 million homes, and I'm only going to pay 10 bucks. It's like, how do you expect this person to find someone for less than $10? There's no way. So whether the pay-per-lead agency makes money or loses money, you are going to have a set cost per lead. So it's not going to be, oh, I hired this agency and they haven't gotten me a lead in a week, but we're spending $100 a day. There's nothing like that. It's you only pay for what you get. And I'm pretty sure that's like an insurance line. But another pro of pay per lead, which I'm going to go into the cons in a moment, but another pro, they spend the money. I talked about this a second ago, but they spend money, not you. You are going to get agencies to spend their money. If you've ever been tired of an agency spending your money, wasting it, whatever, now they're going to spend their money in order to get you leads. And so this is why some of these big companies do this, because like I mentioned earlier, where some people are reliant on one in-house media buyer, here the agency is spending their money. They're filtering the leads. They're doing all the creative output. They're setting the cost per lead, so you don't have to pay $1 over or under. And it doesn't affect your brand. So long story short, these big companies love this because they're no longer reliant. It's like putting all of your eggs in one basket investing. If you ever invested, you know you shouldn't be putting all of your eggs in the S&P 500 or all of your eggs into one stock. You want to put a little bit here, put a little bit here. And this is what these big companies do. They have a ton of lead vendors that are just sending them exclusive leads, which you don't get exclusive leads just going to one of the big names. Sometimes they use third-party people who are not as known. Somebody like Stoy Media, which, by the way, if you are potentially interested in buying leads, click the link below and book a call. But now let's talk about, when is it bad? When is this pay-per-lead model not going to work for you? Because let's be honest, you have to know, you have to have the right expectations. So sometimes this is a con or it's a pro, depending on like what you kind of work out with the company. If you go to one of the really big names and be like, I want exclusive leads, you're going to maybe get charged $225 a lead. Like you're going to get charged some insane amount because they have so many customers that they just need to split up the lead volume across. But if you decide to buy share leads because you don't know the difference, which I'm going to remove exclusive because it's truly not a con to buy exclusive leads unless you suck, and then buying any leads is not going to work for you. But sometimes if you don't work out the right deal, you are going to get shared leads. And shared leads suck because shared leads means you and 5 other people are going to get that lead, and you are all going to be calling this lead all day long to get on the calendar, get them on your calendar. And essentially what this means is 5 people are going to meet with them. They're going to get 5 estimates, and one of those people is going to give a shockingly low price, and they're going to win every single time unless you are an insane salesman. You don't even have to be that good, but I don't know. I'm not a salesman. I'm the marketing guy. But what I'm trying to say is you can get shared leads if you don't work out the right deal. Now, another one, like any of these, whether you have a media buying team or an agency or you're buying leads, you need to have processes. So if you, this isn't even a con. You just need this, and I need you to have the right expectation because you can't just buy leads. and expect them to just fall into your lap and book and close. Unless you're buying appointments, you need to have a good setting process. You need to have a call center. You need to have somebody to call these leads within minimum 5 seconds of them coming in, or maximum 5 seconds of them coming in. So unless you have that, buy appointments. You can probably buy an appointment for $300 to $400 to $600 in roofing. Depending on your vertical, it may be totally different. Feel free to look it up. We don't sell appointments. But unless you set appointments, you need a call center. And if you do, get appointments per appointment, you pay per appointment, then you still need to be good at closing, which some people who have been doing referrals for a very long time don't really understand this part. They end up thinking that, oh, I can just get as many appointments as I can, and I know that 1 in 10 is going to close. Okay, but is 1 in 10 even going to be profitable at that point if you're spending $300 an appointment? You're going to be spending a whole lot of money, $3,000 per job, which is absolutely insane, in order to get a closed deal. So you need to also be good at sales. You need to be good at setting appointments. And everybody says, oh, I'm good at sales. You're good at sales until your money is on the line, and then you end up blaming everybody but you. So just please have humility and admit when it's your fault, because that's the only way you're going to grow. But another con of paying per lead is the fact that it doesn't affect your brand. It doesn't grow your brand. Now, if you partner with the right company, they may run your brands. They may run under your company name, still spend their money, still only charge you per lead. Now, there's probably minimums, and actually Story Media does this, but we have a minimum, which you'll have to jump on the call. We'll talk about it. But it doesn't affect your brand is also a con. I'm not going to write it down just because it depends. But it doesn't affect your brand in the fact that it's not going to grow your company the way running your own Facebook ads does. But you don't need Facebook ads. You don't need Google ads. You don't need LSA. You need leads. And if you can get good quality exclusive leads, then it's going to work. And that's where you need to start, which I actually do want to talk about it. Sometimes they have shady angles. So sometimes if you buy from the wrong company, you buy leads from the wrong company, they're going to come in on an ad that says, there's this new government program letting seniors replace their roof. And unless you, one, understand how to deal with that and say, hey, I don't know what's happening right now with the marketing, I'll have to talk with them, but we're on this phone call because you need a new roof, right? And you can kind of work them, and this is actually a true strategy, like I just said with that mock phone call, of turning those people who are coming in on a government program into a real appointment who can potentially close. It's a real strategy. But if you work with the wrong company and you expect them to get a lead for $10 or less than $10, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe even just the wrong company because they're still running a shady angle but charging you clean angle prices, which, by the way, an angle is your messaging in the ad. So I know I keep saying angle and shady angles. What this means is an angle is your messaging. So if I'm saying, find out how much a new roof costs, that's your angle. If you're saying, your roof might be leaking, find out, get a free inspection if you live in one of these states, that's an angle. That's your messaging. So I hope that makes sense. And so some people will say, there's this government program helping seniors get a new roof. And you're going to get on the phone with some of these people and they're going to be expecting a free roof or a government grant or something. And you're just not going to be able to get through to them properly. So I really urge you, vet the companies you're running, vet the companies you're working with, look at their ad library, look at what types of ads they're running. And yes, they're probably going to have to run something a little incentivized, like get an estimate and it might be thousands less, or find out how much a new roof costs. Here's this cost calculator, try this out. Something like that. They have to run something a little bit incentivized so that they can actually get somebody to click and convert. But I can tell you this, nobody remembers the ad they came in on. If you ask any of your leads, just do this little test for me. Ask any of the leads you're going to speak to in the next week and just ask them, what ad did you click on? Do you remember? None of them. I'm telling you, 1 in 100 people are going to know what ad they came in on. So the reason they clicked on it is because they need a new roof. It doesn't matter what it said. It just means they have to come in and be expecting to get an estimate on a new roof. And so, yes, they're probably going to have to run something a little bit incentivized, but You want to make sure that the quality is there. You want to judge them based on the amount of leads that are turning into appointments. You want to judge them on how good their leads are, not how good they're closing, that's on your salesman, but how good are these leads turning into appointments that later turn into closes. And so if you have any questions or you are potentially looking to buy leads, click the link below, book a call, and we'd love to talk with you soon.